The story begins in a world where image is everything. Our main character, Donald Trump, moves through life surrounded by symbols of wealth and power. His name is etched in gold on skyscrapers, whispered in boardrooms, splashed across magazine covers. Every handshake, every photograph, every headline reinforces the idea that he was born to lead. At home, the halls are lined with portraits of proud ancestors. Family stories are retold at every holiday dinner, stories of hard work, smart deals, and unbreakable bonds. The Trump name means success. It means respect. To outsiders, Donald's life seems perfect, impossibly grand, untouched by doubt or struggle. Yet beneath the surface, everything is about control. The world expects confidence, decisiveness, and strength from a man like him. Any sign of weakness must be hidden. The image must be flawless. No one can see the cracks that sometimes appear late at night when the crowds are gone and the mask slips, even just for a moment. For decades, Donald Trump has lived within these walls, protected, admired, and above all, believed. But how much of that belief is real, and how much is carefully staged for the world to see? The first cracks were easy to ignore. A strange line in a decades-old biography, a newspaper clipping from the 1940s that didn't quite add up. A story told one way on camera, but differently behind closed doors. Most people didn't notice, most didn't care, but Jasmine Crockett noticed. To her, truth was never something to be accepted at face value, especially not from the mouth of power. As a former public defender, she had spent her life picking apart lies dressed as facts and exposing myths sold as history. So when she reviewed Trump's testimony, the inconsistencies jumped out. Why were there gaps in Fred Trump's travel records? Why did certain medical files vanish from public archives in 1946? Why were two names, Marianne and Elizabeth Maloud, attached to one woman in immigration documents? Jasmine didn't go public. Not yet. Instead, she did what prosecutors do best. She watched, listened, and waited. Every question she asked in committee seemed routine on the surface, but each one was a thread she was slowly pulling. One slip of the tongue, one poorly rehearsed answer, and she'd have her opening. And behind her calm expression, Jasmine began to build something far more dangerous than a theory. She began to build a case. Behind every myth is a human being, flawed, afraid, and quietly desperate to be seen. Donald Trump, for all his bravado and bluster, carried something few ever noticed: the constant pressure to be enough. Enough for the family name. Enough for his father's impossible expectations. Enough for a public that never stops watching. There were nights, rare quiet nights, when even he sat in silence, staring at photographs that didn't match the stories he told. A childhood memory that didn't quite fit. A name he once heard whispered at a family gathering, but never asked about again. And then there was Jasmine Crockett. She didn't grow up with gold-plated walls or private tutors. Her mother was a nurse. Her father was a janitor who left work every day with aching hands but never stopped smiling. Jasmine's success wasn't inherited. It was earned through exhaustion, disappointment, and an unshakable sense of justice. She remembered being a little girl watching her parents get ignored at banks and grocery stores because of the color of their skin. She remembered how that felt, like your story didn't matter. And now here she was in a room built to silence people like her. But she wouldn't be quiet. In this battle, it wasn't just about proving what was true. It was about making sure that people like her father, forgotten, overlooked, underestimated, finally had their stories heard. It began with a chair being pulled back. The sound echoed louder than it should be, bouncing off the marble walls of room 2154 like a gunshot in a chapel. Every head in the room turned, not just because Donald Trump was about to speak, but because Jasmine Crockett had already placed a single manila envelope on the table in front of her, and everyone noticed. The press gallery shifted forward in their seats. Phones were raised. Recorders clicked on. This wasn't just another committee hearing. This was about to become something else entirely. Trump adjusted his mic with one hand and pointed at Jasmine with the other. "Let me say this loud and clear," he began, voice confident, measured, familiar. "This whole thing is a political stunt, a distraction. My father built one of the greatest real estate empires in America, and I carry that legacy forward. That's not up for debate." But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in slightly, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Thank you, Mr. Trump. Since you mentioned your father's legacy, would you mind clarifying his business activities in Queens during the summer of 1946, specifically between June and September?" There it was, the shift, a subtle tightening in Trump's jaw, a single blink, too slow. His fingers, once tapping in rhythm, paused. The room felt it. No one said a word, but they all felt it. This wasn't about buildings anymore. It was about bloodlines. And for the first time in decades, Donald Trump was being asked a question that no amount of bravado could bury. Trump didn't answer right away. For a man known for dominating every room, every microphone, every moment, his silence was the loudest thing in the chamber. He glanced to the side toward his legal team. One lawyer gave a slow blink, the kind that says we weren't expecting this. Another began flipping pages in a binder that suddenly felt useless. Trump shifted in his chair. Then finally he spoke loud, certain rehearsed. My father had dozens of projects that year. He was a very busy man. I don't have every date memorized, but I know this: he was working. That's what he did. That's what I learned from him. But something was off. The volume was there. The bravado too. But the rhythm was broken, like a piano played just slightly out of tune. Jasmine didn't respond. Not yet. She just sat there, hands still expression neutral, watching. Watching the way Trump's fingers now tapped unevenly. Watching the way his foot beneath the table began to bounce. Watching how his confidence was no longer spilling from his mouth, but leaking out in pieces. Behind him, an aide scribbled something quickly and passed it to a lawyer. Behind her, a reporter leaned in and whispered, "Did he just dodge that?" The energy in the room shifted. What had started as a confident defense now smelled like fear. And for the first time, even some of Trump's allies looked unsure. In every room of power, the loudest voices are never the most dangerous. It's the ones who say nothing that hold the sharpest knives. Behind Donald Trump, seated just 2 chairs apart, were 2 very different men, both wearing the same Navy suit, both nodding when the cameras pointed their way. The first Congressman, Reid, longtime ally, always quick with a press quote defending Trump's legacy. But lately, he'd gone quiet. His social media had fewer mentions of family values and more photos of bipartisan town halls. He hadn't returned Trump's last call. The second, Senator Mallory, a Democrat with a polite smile and a reputation for playing both sides of the aisle. No one really knew where he stood. He asked all the right questions, but his staff had just been seen in a closed-door meeting with Jasmine Crockett the night before. And then there was Melinda Graves, Trump's longtime executive assistant. She stood near the back, arms crossed, unreadable. She had been with him for over 20 years. She knew every schedule, every contact, every version of every story. She never spoke out of turn, but today her eyes didn't follow Trump like they used to. They followed Jasmine. In moments like this, truth doesn't just rely on facts. It relies on who has the courage to believe them. And in that room, the lines were starting to blur. Some still clung to the myth out of loyalty, fear, or habit. Others were quietly shifting inch by inch towards something dangerous. The truth: she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Jasmine Crockett simply reached down and opened the first manila envelope. It made a soft click as the brass clasp released. But in that dead silent chamber, it sounded like the crack of thunder. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, aged slightly yellowed at the edges, but unmistakably official. "Mr. Trump," she said calmly, "this is New York City birth certificate number 47291, dated July 15, 1946. It lists a Frederick Trump as present at Presbyterian Hospital. Not with your mother, Mary Ann Trump, but with a woman named Elizabeth Mloud." A visible chill passed through the room. Trump leaned forward as if trying to squint the truth away. His lips parted, but no sound came out. One of his lawyers reached for a water bottle and missed. On the document, clearly shown to the committee and the cameras, were the names, the date, the signature. A birth, a hospital, a name that didn't belong in the official Trump family story. The silence stretched. Then came the whispers, first from the gallery, then among the staffers. Did she say a different mother? Is that real? Even some Republican members shifted in their seats. One of them, Senator C., tapped his pen against his pad furiously without writing anything. His jaw clenched. Trump finally spoke. That proves nothing. My father knew thousands of people in New York real estate. That name Elizabeth could be anyone. But his voice cracked at the end, just slightly, and that was all Jasmine needed. She placed the document gently on the table in front of her. The camera zoomed in. The world was now watching. He stared at the paper as if it were a ghost. Donald Trump didn't blink, didn't move. For a full 5 seconds, he looked like a statue frozen in the face of something he couldn't explain. Then slowly the cracks began to show. His hand moved to straighten his tie, but missed. His fingers curled into a fist, then opened, then clenched again. "This is fake," he muttered. It's a smear tactic. It's disgusting. But the volume was gone. The fire in his voice had dimmed. There was no thunder, just static. Jasmine didn't flinch. She sat still, calm, composed. Her eyes didn't blink. Her breathing didn't change. Trump's legal team looked at each other, but no one reached for the mic. And then it started the unraveling. The room shifted. Aide whispers, a gasp from a journalist. Senator Reid turned to look at Melinda Graves, Trump's longtime assistant, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. Even the American flag on the wall, still and silent, seemed to carry weight it hadn't moments before. "This is a lie," Trump snapped louder this time, slapping the table. "I know who my mother is. I know who my father is. You people are sick." But his voice broke again, and this time everyone heard it. There was no rally crowd to cheer, no teleprompter, no media consultant to cut the feed. Just a man cornered by the truth. Jasmine leaned in slightly, voice low and firm. "No one is questioning your memories, Mr. Trump, but we are questioning the facts you were given. There's a difference." And that was the moment the room went from disbelief to realization. Flashback 1987, Queens, New York. A boy no older than 11 presses his ear to the door. Inside, his father's voice booms a storm of accusations and threats. The boy flinches, but doesn't cry. He's used to this. Then something different. A name. Not his mother's. A woman's voice responds, softer, unfamiliar, pleading. The boy backs away, eyes wide, running to his room. Flashback 1994, Mar-a-Lago. In a private study lined with gold trim, a young Donald flips through a manila folder. Inside, birth records, letters, and a single black and white photograph with a name scribbled across the back. He looks over his shoulder. No one's watching. He slips the papers into the fireplace. No hesitation, just control. The photo curls and blackens. Present day, parallel scene. As Jasmine stands with the document in hand, a similar photo is projected behind her. It's the same woman, the same handwriting. But this one didn't burn. She speaks gently, but it cuts like a scalpel. The truth doesn't disappear just because you buried it. It waits. A murmur in the room. Flashback 2003. A hospital corridor. A nurse leans against the wall, a clipboard pressed to her chest. She watches as a woman signs her name on a birth certificate but pauses. Her hand trembles. She glances toward the window where a black car waits. She signs anyway, but the hesitation is noted. Recorded, forgotten by most except one. The hearing room felt like it was holding its breath. Jasmine slowly placed a document on the table. Not a dramatic slam, just enough to make the paper whisper across the polished wood. It was a notarized form. One name was Donald John Trump, the other a name no one expected. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters leaned in. Flashbulbs exploded. Trump looked at the paper, then at Jasmine. His lips twitched. His eyes darted to the door like a man searching for escape. Then he stood up abruptly. "This is fake. You're all playing a game." "A disgusting, sick game," his voice thundered. The audience murmured. Some loyalists clapped. Others stared in stunned silence. Jasmine didn't flinch. She let the words bounce off her like bullets that couldn't pierce truth. "Is it a game, Mr. Trump, or is it the moment the game ends?" His face flushed red. He slammed his hand on the table. "I built this country. I don't have to answer to you." The room broke into chaos. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. Someone yelled for order. Then quietly, Melania stood up in the back row. She didn't say a word, but she walked out. Trump saw it, his breath caught in his throat. That shook him more than the evidence. His voice dropped, almost pleading now. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it had." And Jasmine, steady as ever, replied, "It went this far the moment you thought no one would dare speak." The truth was no longer a rumor. It was ink on paper, eyes in the room, a silence too heavy to ignore. But what comes after the truth is the test. Melania didn't return. Barron stopped responding to calls. The Trump family dinner table, once grand and full of noise, was now a quiet war zone. Forks scraped china like knives on bone. Ivanka sat stiffly, her eyes lowered, her hands shaking as she clutched her wineglass. Eric whispered, "We can still spin this. Say it was fabricated. Blame the media." But Ivanka muttered, "What if it's true?" The room fell still. Meanwhile, in the world outside, former allies fumbled with microphones. Senator Graham dodged questions. Fox anchors stalled on air. Commentators debated, is loyalty to a man greater than loyalty to the law? One night, a surprise, Jared Kushner appeared on a late-night talk show. Eyes shadowed, voice low, he said, "There comes a time when protecting someone means destroying what they built. I won't do that. Not again." America stirred. Even among Trump supporters, fractures began to show. Some rallied harder, but others slowly turned away. A woman at a rally clutched her red hat, tears streaming. "I believed in him. I voted for him. But my son is in jail because of laws he pushed. How can I still pretend?" Moral lines blurred. Forgiveness hung in the air like fog, close but never quite touching. It dropped like a bomb, cold, precise, and irreversible. A private investigator had been following the whispers. One email led to a name led to an address, and inside a dusty storage unit in the upstate New York, tucked behind crates of old campaign banners and files no one thought mattered. There it was, a flash drive. When the file opened, silence fell across the room. On screen, a video time-stamped, clear and devastating. Donald Trump, speaking plainly. No spin, no press, no audience. "If this ever gets out, it's over for me." He named names, described actions, admitted to secrets so long buried that even his closest allies gasped. The footage was authenticated by 3 independent forensic labs. There was no denial now. Jasmine Crockett received the footage first. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she just said, "Play it." And when it finished playing, there were no cheers, just stunned silence. America sat on the edge of its seat. Fox News cut to commercial. CNN didn't. The wave hit hard. Former defenders deleted tweets. Funders went quiet. Political allies disappeared from interviews. Subreddits exploded. TikTok lit up. And the public finally saw him. Not the myth, the man. And they couldn't unsee it. He used to walk into a room and the air shifted. People stood straighter. Smiles stiffened. Phones went up. Donald Trump wasn't just a man, he was a force, a spectacle, a legacy wrapped in red, white, and gold. But not anymore. Now he walked into that same room and the silence was deafening. No one met his eyes. The elevator operator didn't speak. His driver didn't greet him. Melania gone to her mother's. His son's once loud defenders now reduced to carefully worded tweets and lawyer-approved statements. "Ivanka, I love my father, but I must protect my children." The world had moved. Cable news ran his fall like a funeral in slow motion. Anchor after anchor, voice shaking, laid out the timeline, how the empire built on bravado began to crack. The illusion was gone. The gold was rust. The loyalists, they vanished with the wind. Some denied ever knowing. Some sold their stories. Some just disappeared. But the public wasn't just watching, they were reacting. They were furious. Not just at the lies, but that they had believed them. That they had clapped. That they had posted, that they had defended. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was shared. And in that shared shame, something bigger broke. The myth of untouchable power, the belief that status makes someone sacred. And Trump, for the first time in his life, looked small, not defeated, worse, exposed. The room was quiet now. No advisors, no lights, no cameras. Just the tick of a heavy clock and the sound of a man breathing through his own collapse. Donald Trump sat alone in his office, if you could still call it that. The mahogany desk, once a symbol of power, now looked like a coffin lid. He looked at himself in the mirror. Not the man on magazine covers. Not the crowd charmer. Not the builder of towers or the breaker of rules. Just a man, tired, aging, exposed. The silence was thick, but it wasn't peace. It was reckoning. Regret twisted in his chest, but pride still fought back. "She set me up," he whispered. "This is a witch hunt." But even he didn't believe it anymore. The lies had rotted the truth until even he couldn't find it. He wasn't sure when the performance stopped and the person began, or if the person had ever existed. Then a knock, soft, measured, intentional. Jasmine Crockett stood in the doorway, calm, unshaken, and strangely not triumphant. She didn't gloat, didn't sneer. She simply looked at the man who once mocked her on live TV and said, "Truth doesn't destroy people, Mr. Trump. It sets the rest of us free." He opened his mouth to argue, but there was nothing left to say. For the first time, he felt it, not just defeat, but exposure. Not just humiliation, but a hollowing out. He had spent decades building an empire brick by brick out of image and influence. And Jasmine, she hadn't burned it down. She had simply held up a mirror. The fallout was everywhere, on phones and comment sections on the news. Some laughed, others raged, but something deeper stirred in those watching quietly. Because this wasn't just Trump's story anymore. It was the story of anyone who's ever told themselves a lie too many times, who built a version of life out of convenience or pride until it cracked, until someone held up a mirror. And for many, that mirror hurt. People began whispering things they hadn't dared say. I stayed in that job for 10 years, pretending it meant something. I ignored the signs because the truth was harder than the lie. I defended them even when my gut knew better. Viewers didn't just see a political downfall. They saw themselves in the quiet denial, in the fragile armor of ego, in the price of unchecked power. One woman tweeted, "I hated Jasmine at first. I thought she was just trying to humiliate him, but now I realize she gave him the only honest moment he's ever had." Another wrote, "This isn't about Trump anymore. This is about me, and the parts of myself I've kept hidden." For all the scandal and spectacle, what lingered in people's hearts wasn't drama. It was the uncomfortable, unshakable question: what part of my life is built on a lie, and what would happen if I stopped protecting it? The world had turned its back. Allies fell silent. Supporters vanished. Even his own reflections seemed foreign now. Donald Trump stood alone, not in a courtroom, not on a stage, but in the stillness of his private suite where truth couldn't be spun and mirrors couldn't lie. The phone buzzed endlessly, legal counsel, PR teams, desperate strategists. But none of them would make the decision he now had to make. Would he double down, deny, deflect, destroy? Or would he do the unthinkable, admit the money trail, admit the manipulation, admit the moments where he knew it was wrong and did it anyway? Outside, Jasmine Crockett hadn't spoken a word since the last revelation. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than 1,000 accusations. He sat at the edge of his bed, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of accountability. A man who had lived his life behind walls of money, power, privilege, was now faced with something raw and terrifying honesty. For the first time, the choice wasn't political. It wasn't strategic. It was moral. And there was no one left to hide behind. He stepped out into the light. Not metaphorically. Literally, Trump opened the doors of his private suite and walked straight into the press briefing room. Cameras flashed. Microphones tilted forward. America held its breath. For a moment, he stood still. Then he spoke. But what came out wasn't a full confession. Not truth, not humility. It was deflection, finger pointing, vague legalese, blame shifting, a performance, not a reckoning. And just like that, a line was drawn. Some saw it as cowardice. Jasmine Crockett stood among reporters, her jaw clenched but her eyes clear. She had come hoping somewhere deep inside that accountability might emerge. Instead, she watched a man fall back into performance, into ego. Across the country, reactions split. One senator resigned not in disgrace, but in protest. "I will not stand beside a man who cannot stand with truth," he said. A longtime family friend wept during a live interview. "I begged him to come clean." We all did. But others, they stayed, smiled, defended. "It's all politics," they shrugged. "It's just noise." The public, though, they were no longer fooled. Twitter exploded. Hashtags surged, truth matters, coward or courage, stand with Jasmine. Even those who once remained silent found their voices. For the first time, America wasn't asking what Trump would do. They were asking what they would do. Because in that moment, the story stopped being his. It became ours. The truth didn't just break a man. It cracked open a system. In the weeks that followed Jasmine Crockett's confrontation and the collapse of Trump's narrative, the ripple effects spread far beyond Washington. Media networks scrambled to retract years of biased headlines. Editors issued apologies. One primetime anchor sobbed on air. "We didn't just fail journalism, we failed the people." Laws were reopened. A 2017 bill previously dismissed as inconvenient suddenly gained bipartisan support. Whistleblower protections were expanded. Police reform, long stalled, was now demanded. Across the country, people looked in the mirror. Corporate boards that once hired quietly discriminatory executives were forced to confront their practices. Judges who'd closed their eyes to bias were being reviewed. A university president resigned after a viral clip revealed him mocking Jasmine's testimony years prior. And then came the global wave. From London to Lagos, hashtags surged. "Justice does not expire, Crockett effect. Truth is contagious." Young activists in Brazil held a protest titled, "What Jasmine Started." A South Korean lawmaker referenced the hearing during a speech on government transparency. In South Africa, a mural of Jasmine was painted on a crumbling courthouse wall with 3 words beneath, "We remember courage." But the biggest change, conversations real uncomfortable and long overdue, began in kitchens, classrooms, boardrooms, and churches. Fathers apologized to daughters. Colleagues checked their silence. Entire communities started asking, if the truth was buried here, what else are we not seeing? It wasn't about one woman anymore. It was about all of us. At the end of every storm, there's silence. Not because the damage is undone, but because truth once revealed no longer needs to shout. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument. She didn't just expose a man or a system. She reminded an entire generation of something we too often forget: truth matters. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it tears families apart, even when it makes you the enemy of powerful people. Justice is worth the pain, because the alternative, silence, complicity, comfort at the cost of others, rots everything from the inside out. Justice isn't a prize handed to the loudest voice. It's a fire that demands endurance. It's not always immediate, but it is always necessary. In leadership, it's not inherited. It's not bought. It's earned in moments of courage, in seconds of silence, in the choice to stand tall when the ground is crumbling. Older viewers know this best. You've seen what happens when lies go unchecked. You've watched good people suffer quietly while the world cheers the wrong heroes. You know the cost of denial and the power of reckoning. So maybe this story isn't just about Jasmine. Maybe it's a mirror. Maybe it's a whisper to every person who's ever swallowed the truth, smiled through injustice, or been told their voice didn't matter. It does. It always did. Now go speak it. Not every wound heals clean. Not every truth brings applause. But sometimes what matters most is that we start. Jasmine Crockett didn't fix the system overnight. She didn't undo years of injustice with a single truth bomb. But she lit a match in a place grown dark from silence. And now we see people talking honestly. We see communities asking better questions. We see those once silent finding their voice. Families might not be whole again, but they're learning to look each other in the eye. Laws might not change tomorrow, but new drafts are being written. And those who once ruled without question, now they're being questioned. Rebuilding doesn't look like grand speeches or viral headlines. It looks like quiet courage, like showing up, like not walking away when things get hard. That's the future Jasmine left behind, not perfection, but possibility, not peace in a bow-tied box, but a people who now know justice can rise if we stand. So now you've seen reputations collapse. You've seen truths claw their way out of silence. You've watched a single voice ripple into a reckoning. But what about you? What story are you telling the world, intentionally or not? What lies have you swallowed to keep peace? Whose silence have you mistaken for loyalty? And if tomorrow your entire life were projected on a screen, would you be proud or would you flinch? We all leave something behind, a title, a wound, a whisper of who we really were. So ask yourself, when the spotlight turns, when your name is the one being questioned, will you have the courage to face it? And more than that, what kind of legacy do you really want to leave behind? In a world obsessed with appearances, it's easy to build your life on fragile truths, half-lies, and silence. But the longer you protect the illusion, the more devastating the crash when reality finally strikes. The story we just witnessed reminds us that truth has a way of surfacing, whether you're ready or not. Real courage doesn't come from power titles or legacy. It comes from accountability. It comes from the willingness to say, "I was wrong," and to rebuild from that truth. So whether you're a public figure or just a person trying to do right by your loved ones, ask yourself, are you living a life that could stand the test of truth? If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, reflection, then don't let it end here. Subscribe now to Mr. Exposed Stories for more powerful stories that peel back the layers and speak the truth behind the headlines. Hit the bell so you never miss the next reckoning, because the next story might just be yours.